Hello and welcome to the OTB channel. Today we're going to look at Linux Mint. The latest version 19.3 was released last week, and I've not actually looked at this distro before, but when it was released in 2006 it quickly gained a reputation for being the go-to distro for beginners to Linux and also for those migrating from Windows. Does it still deserve that reputation? Well, let's take a look. So Linux Mint 19.3, it's called Tricia. Linux Mint has always adopted these ladies' names for its latest releases. Although I've not looked at it on the channel before, I have used it in the past, and I have to say that over the years, Linux Mint would be the distribution that I had tended to recommend to people who were looking to migrate from Windows. And as you're all aware, there are many reasons that you might want to do that. But why Linux Mint? Well, first and foremost, back in the day when Linux wasn't that easy to use, or many distributions weren't that easy to use, Linux Mint set its stall out to be new user-friendly. It came fully loaded with all the codecs that you could possibly need, and it was a friendly interface. In fact, it rejected the GNOME 3 interface when there was that shift from GNOME 2 to GNOME 3, and it developed the Cinnamon desktop, which it still uses in its default mode, although you can also download an XFCE and a Mate edition. Now, at the time, Cinnamon was very, very specific to Linux Mint, and I like the Cinnamon desktop. I'm a fan. I prefer Mate, but I do like the Cinnamon desktop. It is very Windows-like, and a new user coming over from Windows 7 or Windows 10 would not have a culture shock. It looks very similar to what they've been used to. It's easy to install, and it soon gained a reputation for being the go-to distribution if you were brand new to Linux. 2019, though, has seen a few changes of opinions. Most famously, I think, DT from DistroTube made the comment that Linux Mint should die, quite controversially, and I suppose his point really was that there are many distros out there in 2019. Many of them are very user-friendly. What does Linux Mint now offer that other distros don't? Your likes of MX Linux, or I don't know, pick any distro that you like. I'm just looking here at the distro watch page. You can go to Ubuntu, obviously, Elementary operating system, Solus, Deepin. The list goes on of user-friendly distros. Peppermint, of course. So I think the argument really was it's Ubuntu-based. It's based on the Ubuntu long-term support release. If you want to use Ubuntu LTS, well, download and use Ubuntu LTS. Of course, the thing that separated Linux Mint originally was it had the Cinnamon desktop. But in this day and age, you can now get a version of Ubuntu with the Cinnamon desktop as well, and most other distributions will allow for it to be installed. So what we're left with then is what's unique about Linux Mint, and does its look and feel and usability appeal to you? I'll say right now that I don't think any distro should die. Linux Mint was one of the big beasts, and looking at Distro Watch, it's still number 3. I know Distro Watch isn't a true representation of popularity, but it would be fair to say that Linux Mint is still an incredibly popular distro, and it's noted for its very friendly community. It has an active forum which is friendly to new users, unlike forums which I believe are less so. And I won't mention the Arch forum here, because although it has the reputation, I'm not actually a member, so I don't know. But anyway, look, let's make our own minds up and let's give it a spin. So on the screen in front of you, you should now see VirtualBox, and you'll see that an entry there on the left is for Linux Mint. This is the latest version of Linux Mint 19.3. I've applied the normal settings I use in VirtualBox, 8 gig of RAM, 2 cores of my i5 processor, and I've also set it up to boot in EFI mode, as I really believe that in this day and age, that's a crucial test. So let's boot up and see what happens. Needless to say, as normal, the page or the boot up screen goes to my other screen. Okay, so booted, not a problem. Let's start Linux Mint and see what it's like. Nothing's happening initially, but we've seen this again and again with VirtualBox. They really need to sort out their EFI implementation. But anyway, it's up and running now, and hopefully we should be at the Cinnamon desktop. And indeed we are. Let me just see if I can get this resolution to be a little bit better. Okay, well, the good news is the VirtualBox guest editions appear to be installed by default, so it's booted straight into a full 1920 by 1080 screen, which is great. And we have, well, it's got to be said, a very nice looking desktop in front of us. We'll go through this after the installation, but let's just quickly click on the Install Linux Mint icon there and see what the process is. Okay, it appears to be the standard Calamaris installer, so let's just continue. We want English UK. Install third-party software for graphics and Wi-Fi hardware, Flash, MP3 and other media. Well, yeah, by all means, let's click on that. And see where it now takes us. Calamaris is pretty much the same with everything, every distro these days that uses it. And it's provided us really with a standard base for installing from a live CD. So, erase disk and install Linux Mint. Yes, I'd like to do that. So let me hit install now. And I notice straight away that on the automatic option, it has picked up that I'm using a UEFI boot and it's creating an ESP partition. So great, click continue. It's picked up the right time zone, which isn't that usual. So let me just go down here and enter my password. And it's getting on with the installation. So let's speed this section up. Right, so installation is finished. We started around 12:35. It's now 12:41, so 6 minutes. Pretty good. Let's just hit restart now and see what happens. Please remove the installation media. I'm just going to press enter. And see what happens. Strange. For some reason, it seems to be stuck. No, there we are. It's booting straight away. Or we hope it is. Right. Well, I have to say that was an incredibly fast boot. So let's just log in and see what happens. And there we have our Linux Mint desktop with a little welcome screen at the beginning and telling me my system is currently running without video hardware acceleration and asking if I'd like to launch the driver manager. Well, I'll tell you what, let's launch the driver manager and see what it can find. I would be surprised if it actually finds anything whilst it's running on VirtualBox, but we'll see in a second. The answer would appear to be no. Okay, no problem. So let's work our way around this screen. Right, so the welcome screen. I know in this day and age there are many distros that include a welcome screen, but Linux Mint, I believe, was one of the first. And it provides basically links for new users when they first install the system. So after the welcome, let's move down to first steps. Right, so one of the things Linux Mint enables right from the outset is an application to take system snapshots. Absolutely great idea. You can take a snapshot and revert to that snapshot if things go wrong. So almost like for the Windows user, when Windows used to do constant restore states or restore backups. We then have a link to the driver manager to check whether or not there are any proprietary or free drivers that could be installed for your system. The update manager, let's launch that, see what happens. Welcome to the update manager. Okay, it provides your operating system with software and security updates. Let's have a look. This would appear to be their own update manager by the looks of it. You can, of course, still use apt on the command line. Please switch to another Linux Mint mirror. Your apt configuration is corrupt. Interesting. I switched, and just before I switched on the recording to a UK mirror. So let's see what the problem is. Right. So there's my official repositories. Let's go for, I don't know, University of Kent mirror? Why not? And let's try something else here. Let's go for Bytemark. Oh God, you've got to be quick. And click OK. And it appears to be downloading now, but not very quickly. So let's get this sorted and we'll come back in a second. Oh no, it's worked. Right, so let's click that off and let's refresh. I'm sure there's going to be many updates that are available to install from here. A new version of the update manager is available. Okay, well, let's apply the update and see what happens from there. Linux Mint is still based on the LTS version of Ubuntu. I do sort of wonder to myself why they didn't just wait until the next LTS is released in April, but hey-ho. So, yeah, there's quite a few updates there, but we're not going to bother with them. Not at this stage, anyway. So, updates, fairly straightforward to do. Desktop layout. Choose your favourite desktop layout. We can choose the traditional layout or the modern layout. Let's click traditional and see what happens, if anything. Aha. So it's changed it slightly. Slightly smaller panel. And I have to say, I prefer that look myself. But it came by default with the modern. So let's click back on modern and see if it switches seamlessly, which it seems to do. Okay, great. Then we have an option for system settings. Let's launch that from here. And this won't be something that would put any previous Windows user off, very much like the Linux Mint version of the Windows control panel. In fact, the whole look and feel of this desktop should be quite comfortable for Windows users. It's not using any strange layout that's going to catch them off guard. So what do we have? Appearance to start off with, right at the beginning. So let's have a look. Quite a few default backgrounds to use there. Okay, that's quite nice if you like green. And I notice on the menu here that you can actually go through all the default wallpapers from previous distributions, which I wish every distro would do that. Oh, there's an awful lot to choose from. Tina. These are all the names of the various distributions that Linux Mint has had. So, Burning Coal, let's have a look at that one. It's interesting, it's certainly colourful. Okay, let's just go back up to the standard Linux Mint one and set what I think. Oh, that wasn't the default. Yeah, that looks pretty much like the default. So, okay, lots of nice wallpapers to choose from the offset. We then have the software manager, 60,000 applications available. Now, I'm not the greatest fan of software stores, I have to be honest. I tend to find that it's easier to install things from the command line. But fine, we have editors picks up here. We can move to different sections here. What about if I choose something up in the top left and I search for OBS Studio, for instance? Right, I see that I actually have two different options. Now, I believe that Mint uses Flatpaks rather than snaps, which Ubuntu uses. The fact that we've got two options here makes me wonder what... one of the options is indeed a Flatpak. Right, well, that makes sense to an extent. This is version 24 if we install the Flatpak. And the one from the standard repos is version 21. I know on my Debian stable system, I use Flatpaks for OBS Studio and Kden Live so that I can use the latest version. And clearly you have that option with Linux Mint, which is a good thing as far as I'm concerned. because if you're going to stick with a long-term support release, you may find that some of the applications that you use are slightly dated. Flatpak is one way to, or even Snapd if your distribution supports it, is one way to overcome that. So, okay, we can click on the sections and Microsoft Core Fonts Installer, etc., etc. So, it's a pretty standard software store. Offers the opportunity of installing Flatpaks out of the box from a store, if you like, which is useful. What about the Firewall? I'm presuming it uses UFW and GUFW as the GUI, but let's have a look. Yes, it does. There's GUFW. And I see its status is currently not on. That's not a huge issue in Linux, but you can clearly play around with that. And the fact that it's on your welcome screen right from the word go is a good thing. So let's move down to the next stage, documentation. The Linux Mint documentation consists of a collection of guides available in PDF, EPUB, and HTML and available in many languages. So let's launch that and see what happens. Right, so essentially this is a link to the website. So if I wanted to launch it in English, okay, so it comes up with an installation guide. That's fine, but of course we've just installed it anyway. Let's go to the post-installation stage. Okay, so it tells us about installing drivers there. What about multimedia codecs? Right, so if we tick the box, which we did on installing, everything's already going to be installed. But we can launch the codec installer from the launch menu, sound and video. Okay. And install multimedia codecs. Well, we haven't even got that option here. I am assuming that's because we've already done this stage. Nevertheless, it would be nice to have that option there in the menu that matched up with what it's telling us on the manual. And now it tells us all about system snapshots and how you can back up using rsync or BTRFS, ButterFS as they call it, etc., etc. Okay, all good. We then have a button where we can look at the new features and 19.3 Cinnamon, what's actually happened. Okay, well, let's click out of that now. We can always get back to the settings menu by clicking here. And there you go. Everything that you could possibly need to look at the system is pretty much here. A link to the backgrounds, effects, whatever window effects that you want. Font selection, okay. And themes. The way that Cinnamon manages themes I've always quite liked, in as much as you can click on any of these options and you get these little pop-ups coming for you to choose whichever theme you want. All good. Standard Cinnamon features now. Then accessibility, account details, applets. Okay, so you can install these if you wish. Date and time, desklets. Okay, fine. Little desk widgets that you can add. The desktop. Okay, so which icons do you want on your desktop? So let's have the rubbish bin as well, and it appears straight away. Okay, Extensions. So no extensions installed so far. But if we go to download, there's a whole range of extensions here that we can apply, including the old Compiz wobbly windows. Please don't. The desktop cube, etc., etc. Right, fine. Very configurable, as you can see. The general option, compositor options. Okay. Hot corners, you can set up hot corners. Languages, notifications, online accounts. Right, all the standard GNOME online accounts that you can add. The panel. Do you want to auto hide it? How big do you want it? What do you want it to look like, etc., etc. Preferred applications. That's a nice clean layout, I have to say. Privacy, screensaver, startup application, Windows. Do you want to move the buttons that are currently on the right? Or do you want to use them Mac style on the left? Completely up to yourself. Workspaces and window tiling. Okay. The one thing about Cinnamon is it is very configurable. I used it myself for a little while. In fact, I ran Mint for perhaps about 5 or 6 months several years ago. And I enjoyed the Cinnamon desktop. It is a little heavy, though. I don't know if HTOP is already installed on this, but let's see. No, it's not. Let's see if we can install it. I know I should have run apt update to start off with, but I'm just very quickly trying to find HTOP here. That's actually not that bad. 680 megs. Yeah, it used to be said that Cinnamon was quite hungry as far as RAM's concerned. But to be honest, all desktop environments are pretty much on a par now. We're talking, a few hundred RAM, and with most people having 4 gigs, 8 gigs, 16 gigs, even 32 gigs, what's a couple of 100 megs between friends? For older desktops, perhaps Cinnamon isn't the very best option that you can use. There are certainly lighter weight desktops, but to be honest, it's not a big thing now. Let's have a look at the menu and see what we've got out of the box. Let's have a look at the About. So this is the Mint menu. I do like this, I have to say. I know it's available in some other distros now. I wish it was available in all, because although Mate is my favourite distro, I would much prefer it to have this Mint menu. So let's go down to accessories. What have we got installed by default? Archive Manager, Calculator, Image Viewer, Redshift. Okay, so this is to make it easy on the eyes when it gets to night time. A screenshot tool, a text editor. What text editor does it use by default? It uses Z. Okay. I've used Z before. It's fine. Graphics. We have a drawing application, a simple drawing utility. Let's have a look at that. Excuse me. And it's just called drawing. Okay, fine. I'm not familiar with that at all. I would have liked to have seen the GIMP installed by default, but easy enough to get. What about the internet? We have HexChat, Firefox, Thunderbird, and Transmission. Okay, all good. The LibreOffice suite. Celluloid. I have... play movies and videos. I've not heard of Celluloid before. About celluloid. A GTK front end for MPV. Okay. What about admin? You've got a backup tool there. Disk usage analyzer. Let's have a quick look. Okay, so it's going to analyze what's on the system in OTB VirtualBox. And, oh, it's quite nice to see. So it's just telling us what's what. Fine. What else? You've got your driver manager. HTOP now appears there. The login window. Right, so you can set your background very, very easily here. I think it's using the slick greeter. Don't know. But all nice and clean. Power statistics, printers, software manager, software sources. Synaptic package manager would be my personal favourite for installing packages. System report, time shift. Now, if time shift, that's the backup facility or app that allows you to take snapshots, why have we also got a backup tool here? Okay, so this isn't a full snapshot backup tool. It just lets you back up file settings, etc., etc. Okay, good. What about preferences? Well, here you've got all the individual contents from your settings, places, recent files. Okay. So this is Linux Mint Cinnamon. It's a really nice looking desktop. Cinnamon is incredibly flexible as far as configuring it is concerned. I don't think a Windows user or someone coming from Windows would have a problem with this. The issue, of course, is whether Linux Mint as a distribution, separating it from the fact that it's got the Cinnamon desktop, whether it offers anything special to the new Linux user. Let's go and have a chat about that. So that's Linux Mint 19.3. So I suppose the big question here is, would I use it? And do I still think it deserves the reputation of being the beginner's distro? No, I wouldn't use it. There's your answer to the first question. I have used it in the past. Nothing against the distro itself. I would prefer, personally, to stay closer to the source. Hence, as you know, I use Debian Stable for work and Arch Linux to play. Having said that, as a distro that stands on its own, I think it's incredibly well put together. It boots fast. It's beautiful looking. It really is. I like the tools that it comes with. I like its default configuration. It feels very solid and very stable. And so is it a great beginner's distro? Yeah, I think it is. I think it would be a distro that new Windows users would easily be able to get used to. But is it the beginner's distro? I think that's a hard title to live up to these days. There are lots of distros out there that are beginner friendly these days. MX Linux and Peppermint are two that constantly I'm surprised at every time I look at them. And Linux Mint is, of course, competing in that space, in that beginning user space, against those distros, which each are brilliant in their own right. It doesn't take anything away from Linux Mint. I've often said that it doesn't really matter which distro you use now. It's all about the package manager and the look and feel. The package manager is apt. Nothing wrong with that. Look and feel, it's beautiful. But for me, I like to configure things from scratch. That said, you know, Linux Mint is a great out-of-the-box experience, and I still think it deserves a reputation as one of the greats that we have in the Linux world. Does it deserve to die? Absolutely not. And I'm sure it will continue to go on from strength to strength. The fact that the distribution and the devs of the distribution were responsible for putting together the Cinnamon desktop, I think is also, you know, great praise. And I'm very grateful that they did it because it gives us another choice. So that's it for today. Christmas is almost upon us. Not sure if there'll be another video before then, but I'm sure I'll produce something between Christmas and New Year. So cheers everyone, see you next time.